Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another update video. I've got a ton of stuff to cover in this video, so if you've been waiting on an update, then this video will not disappoint. First of all, I'm going to talk about where I left off in my last video. Then I'm going to talk about some of the projects that I was working on after that, which include a concrete pile, reinforcements for a pier. Also, I did another job where we used pressure washers to clean the hull of a double hulled ship. And then I'm also going to be talking about a second job that I took because commercial diving isn't every single day of the week, so I needed a second job to fill that. And I'm going to be talking about what that job is and why I took that job. And then lastly, I'm going to be talking about the current job that I'm working on. I'm actually working on with another diving company, and this is a huge project they hired me on to do. So I'm going to be talking about that. It's really exciting stuff. So if you want to hear about it, all stay tuned for all of it. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the last job in my last video that I left off on was the marina dock repairs. So basically, a company was hired by the marina to put in new docks and get rid of the old docks, and they needed one diver on scuba to go in and do any underwater assistance that they needed. So that job was done, it's finished. And then I moved on to other jobs. The company I'm currently with, they usually do surveys and UWILDs. I'll talk a little bit more about UWILDs in a minute, but basically that's like their usual stuff that they do. So we might have, one or two a week sometimes, but that's usually what we do. So I just continue doing those surveys and UWILDs, which is a different type of inspection. And then we moved on to a pile job. Now, I didn't do this whole entire job. I basically was hired in or came into the project at the very end. But basically what we were doing is, so you know how piers have basically concrete piles or vertical columns made of concrete that hold up the pier. Well, basically they corrode and break down over time, so we have to put forms around them and basically pour concrete or pump concrete down to the forms and fill them up so that it creates a nice reinforcement to the pile that's breaking down over time. So that was pretty cool. Once again, we're in Hawaii, so it was super clear, beautiful water. It was very good visibility, so it was very fun. And that job was actually Prevailing. So if you don't know what Prevailing is, also known as Davis Bacon wages, it's basically if you work for the state or government, or it's a government property or funded job, you have to get or receive a certain wage minimum or whatever it's called. But basically, it's a certain wage that you have to get paid, and it's a lot more than your normal rate. So basically, I would normally be getting like $35 an hour for diving, but that job, since it was a prevailing wage, I got paid about 80 something dollars an hour. So it depends, I think, if you're attending versus you're scuba diving versus if you're on hat versus if you go deeper than certain depth. But basically, I know that day that we were working, basically we were working that one day, and it took that one Friday, I think it was about 9 hours to complete the job, or 10. So I think I made around $1,000 that one day. So in one day, I made $1,000 just because it was a prevailing wage job. We actually came back that next Monday to take the forms off after the concrete hardened. But that was only for like an hour to take the forms off and then like do like a little inspection, take a little bit of pictures, make sure everything's good to go, and we were already out of there. So, but that one day, yeah, we did pretty good that day. So, anyways, after that job, we did a 2 week project where we were basically working on the hull of a double hulled ship. So this ship was about 300 to 400 feet long. It was a double hull, so you know how ships usually have one hull. Well, this has two hulls, and in the middle is basically a giant gap, and there's nothing. So it's basically like your average pontoon boat. If you ever, went to the lake or wherever that had a boat that you like went underneath that had two pontoons on each side, it's basically like that, but like a giant ship. So basically, they needed an initial survey. So that was the first day of the job. And then it took about 2 weeks to actually clean the bottom of the holes. We used pressure washers to do that. I know what you're thinking, like pressure washers. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it actually worked pretty good. So we would basically have two pressure washers right on the pier next to the ship at all times, and they're basically running the entire time. And we basically took extensions to the wands. So we had the wand, had the regular hose, and then we put extensions on all the way up to the actual pressure washer, and then we jumped in on scuba, and then just went along and did a section by section all the way till we got all the way done with it. And we did the starboard side, then we moved on to the port side. So yeah, that job was pretty cool. Normal diving pay, not prevailing or anything like that. But in the very end, we had to do a UWILD inspection. So we do these inspections actually a lot. So I'm gonna talk about it in case you guys don't know. I believe it stands for underwater inspection in lieu of dry dock. So basically, ships have to be, certified to, be a seagoing vessel, and they basically their certification or whatever expires at a certain time. So in lieu of pulling into a dry dock and doing a full dry dock inspection, they can hire divers to go down and basically extend their sea time until they have to do a dry dock, hence in lieu of dry docking. So basically, if we do their inspection and they pass, they get another 6 months at sea, and they usually still don't pull into dry dock after that 6 months. They come back to us and we do another inspection, and then they extend for even longer, and then they keep extending and extending. So it's kind of redundant, but anyways, so in these UWILDs, we usually do them on HAT so that we can have the camera going with a live video feed going to the dive van, and we have to have inspectors come on board our dive van to watch the video footage. And basically, as a diver, it's your job to follow the weld seams. We usually do boats and barges. So I think barges, their weld seams are a little more straightforward. But with the ships, they can kind of veer off, especially when there's marine growth. It's kind of hard to keep track on a weld seam. You can kind of lose it pretty easily, especially because it's dark underneath boats. And but for UWILDs, it's very important to know your nomenclature, so know your different names of the parts of the boats, and it's important to look professional at all times. So they tell you it's also you're being recorded. That's one of the biggest things. So your voice is being recorded, so you don't want to be cursing. You want to know you want to sound like you know what you're talking about. You want to be basically talking the entire time. You want to be saying like, okay, I'm moving on to the port side or moving forward. Just anything that you're doing, and even if you're moving, you want to be like, I'm moving this way. You want to be talking about corrosion and marine growth percentage, and like sacrificial anode depletion percentage, stuff like that. So um, it's kind of a bigger deal than your average survey. But yeah, so we do that job pretty often. So that kind of capped off that 2 week double hole pressure washing cleaning job. So that was the projects that I was working on with the first diving company. So moving on to my part-time job. So basically, I wasn't getting crazy hours with commercial diving. So basically, I heard about this other job. It's not a commercial diving job. It's basically welding. Basically, what they do is they take shipping containers and they can turn them into whatever you want, whether it's an office or a home or a studio or whatever you want. They can turn a shipping container into that. So there's a lot of cutting, metal cutting, and welding to do with this job. And basically, I got hired on as a fabricator slash welder. So I'm basically using cutting wheels and angle grinders all day, and welding. So that job is about 6 days a week, 7 hours every day. So that keeps me actually pretty busy when I'm not diving, because like I said, I'm not diving all the time. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but that's how I got hurt right here. It's actually a pretty bad cut on my face. And I was actually using an angle grinder, and I basically was cutting in a very bad spot. It was like right above my head, and it was like right near my face. And basically, I was trying to cut a tack weld that was in a very, very, very bad spot. My grip was pretty loose, and my gloves were like not the grippiest at that time, and it bit the metal, and the cutting disc and the angle grinder and everything just came flying at my face and at my nose. So I mean, I got to the hospital, and by the time I cut my nose with the angle grinder, and I got stitches, it was only like a 2 hour difference. So by the time I cut my nose, 2 hours later, I was already stitched up, going home from the hospital. So it wasn't a crazy big deal, but the fact that it happened to my face, it just not the best place to do it. It also broke my nose, so but it didn't affect my nasal passage like a normal nose break would. But anyways, yeah, it's pretty bad. So lesson learned. Make sure that you use an angle grinder with caution and not at a weird angle. And if you think it's at a weird or bad spot, like do not do not attempt to cut it, like, or have someone with 20 years more experience like make that cut for you or something like that, because that was like my second time using an angle grinder with a cutting disc. So yeah, it was definitely not a good thing. But anyways, so yeah, non-commercial diving job. I've been working that kind of as a side gig. Commercial diving takes priority, but sometimes you have a commercial diving job where you're not working full time. You're not working every single day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, So I have to have a secondary job to fill that time. So lastly, I want to talk about the project that I'm working on currently. So basically, I'm working with a different diving company. It's actually a bigger diving company. They actually have their own boats. They're bigger boats. They have multiple boats, and The first diving company doesn't have any. And so that's how you can tell, like, it's a bigger company. They have way more employees. Um, and so they have bigger projects. So they need, especially when a huge project comes up and it's a state funded project and it has to be done ASAP. You know what I mean? So they needed people to come in and help. So I would say it's all about who you know, because the reason why I got chosen for this is because at the first diving company, I met one of my coworkers there, and he basically was talking to this other company, and then he started working on the project, and then he basically told me about it, and said, like, hey, I told them about you. You know, you seem like you got a good head on your shoulders, and you want to learn. So, you know, I told them about you, and they want you to come work on this project. So, um, it's like that saying always goes, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in the diving community, it's a huge deal to network. And, you know, maybe you work for a company for like only like a month or something like that, but the people that you meet there, you want to definitely keep in touch with them, because there's always going to be a time where they're working at a company and they're going to have a spot to fill, and they might hit you up, you know, especially if they worked with you and they know how you are and stuff like that. So it's just a big community in the commercial diving world. So that's basically how I got into the project. Now, this project is also prevailing wage. So there's big money to be made on this project. I think this one's a little bit different. I'm making about $44 an hour just when I'm just tending, because I'm not always diving. Um, and also, not only am I making $44 an hour, but $31 an hour per hour is going to a retirement fund. So basically, it's like $75 an hour, but 31 of that per hour is going towards a retirement fund. It's kind of confusing, but I mean, it's still, you know, good money. But anyways, so the job is a coral reef, basically rebuild, if if you want to put it that way. But basically, something happened where a company's ship was traveling, you know, near the island of Oahu on the south side, and they dropped an anchor or something like that, and it basically dragged a bunch of along the reef, coral reef, and it messed up like an insane amount of coral. And so they're in big trouble. Their insurance is trying to cover it, and basically that's where we come in. We're trying to basically glue like tumbling, you know, lost coral that was broken off, that's just, you know, collecting, you know, rolling around on the ocean floor near the islands. And we basically scoop it up and we apply splash zone to it and glue it back down to the rock or whatever. So it sounds kind of weird, but so splash zone is a two-part epoxy. It actually comes in like paint cans, and they have a part A and a part B. If you know what epoxy is, basically you mix the two parts together, but instead of doing it, you know, in the little tube and you mix it with a toothpick or whatever, this is like handful. You're taking a handful of part A and a handful of part B, and you're like, we mix everything by hand, and I'm talking like gallons and gallons and buckets and like and wheelbarrow fulls, like on the hour, you know, at wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of like splash zone. So it's a lot to mix by hand, but that's how you mix it. And that's what I've been basically spending most of my time doing. At one time, I was scuba diving, and for scuba, they call it a swimmer. So basically, So basically what the project looks like every day is we take the boat out to like the south side of Oahu, and we hook up a 4-point, which is we have, if you want to look at where we're at as a grid, you have 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4. So like kind of like a big square. And at the points of the square, you have buoys that are attached to anchors, and that's where we basically anchor. Now we need 4 of these because we have winches basically on 4 points of the boat, and one winch will go to one corner, one winch will go to, each of the 4 points. So it's called a 4 point because we can actually position ourselves anywhere we want to. So basically, we can pull in one winch and let go loose on another, and we can move anywhere. Kind of like they gave a good analogy, which is like a spider on a spider's web. We can basically pull ourselves to any part in that square or quadrant or whatever that you want to call it. We can pull ourselves to any point in that zone. So basically we hook up to that anchor, and then we get 2 divers on hat in the water. Originally we had 4 divers on hat in the water at a time, but that was because we were working with a second company that had to travel here and everything. But they, since we don't, I guess we didn't need them anymore, they were going back home, so we're back down to 2 hat divers at a time. They're basically diving all day long, and they're attaching the coral to the bottom of the ocean, and they need splash zone. And so the guys up topside on the boat, they're mixing it, and then they need a way for the mixed, they call it mud, is another name for the splash zone. So they mix the mud. They need a way for the mud to get to the divers. So they have a scuba swimmer. So they'll have the swimmer take it in a bucket and swim it out to the divers. So at one point I was a scuba swimmer. They actually let me dive hat one day, which they already have hat divers. So I was told when I started, the only reason I say like they let me dive hat is because I was originally told like, hey, you're gonna be a scuba swimmer, you're gonna be swimming, the splash zone to the divers. And I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. You already have experienced divers like, diving, and I don't want to mess up their rotation and stuff. But then as soon as I got there, they already had other people doing the scuba swimming. So that's when I got, mixed in with the mud mixers, mixing splash zone. And then one day, one other guy worked like all night long, so they needed somebody to step in. So I actually got to dive hat, and it was actually really cool. It was really fun. I dove for like 7 hours and then ate lunch, and then I think I jumped back in for another 2 or 3 hours. So that was the longest dive I did on hat, but the visibility was unbelievable. Like I'm literally in the best place for visibility, I think, for commercial diving in the world, besides like how clear it is. I heard that it's offshore on the oil rigs just because there's no pollution in the water and stuff. But I mean, for inland diving, yeah, I would assume it's the most clear that you can get anywhere. So extremely lucky for that. And the view of Oahu, like while we're on the boat and stuff like that, is just unbelievable. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun. I also got to do another project with them. They're actually working on a bridge job as well. Something happened where like it flooded, and yes, it can flood in Hawaii. I know it sounds kind of weird, but there was actually a huge flood that took out a bridge, or it almost took out a bridge, and the state is trying to pour more concrete to reinforce the bridge. So I actually got to do that with this other company as well. for a few days, and then went back to the coral reef project. But yeah, that's basically what's been going on. If you like the video, please leave a like, leave any comments if you have any questions for me down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next update. Have a great one. Peace.